Wally has been very much involved in scouting through the years. In fact, his involvement dates back to the very first scout troop, Troop 1, that was formed back in Vermont 84 years ago. Wally was a member. Wally Watt.
I think about the old troop. We got together on October the 24th, 1909. We were boys in what they call the Boys Brigade. This was a church organization, but the most of it was marching, close order drill, as they call it. And that was all right as far as it went. But Billy Mill, our Boys Brigade leader, went back home to Scotland. He was a stone cutter in that stone cutting city of ours, Barre, Vermont. He went back to see his father and mother. And while he was there, he heard about scouting. He went back by way of London, came back to us with a scout handbook, a very small one, and some badges, and a little knowledge of the scout oath and law and that sort of thing. He got us together. There were 14 of us. I look at that picture and I think of the boys that were in that troop and how, when he told us about scouting, we said, that's more fun. It's outdoors. And the other stuff was marching indoors. And we wanted to get out and do things outside. And I think of how we were invited to go down to the Older Boys Conference at Ludlow, Vermont, and we had a chance to show off. Everybody needs a chance to show off once in a while. And so we showed them how the scout staffs, that was a stick about 6 foot high, and you could make a carrier with it, take your coats, run this through the sleeves, and then you could take a person who was injured, needed transportation, and that's where we had a chance to show that, a little of signaling. I remember going into the Army later on, and I was supposed to be a kind of an expert in Morse code and semaphore code, and they made me kind of a drill officer because of my training in scouting there. Later on, when I was teaching in Battle Creek, the superintendent called me and said, I have a friend who would like to see you. It turned out to be somebody you've heard of, eating his cereals, W.K. Kellogg, none genuine without this signature. And Mr. Kellogg said, you're in scouting? I said, yes, I have a troop here. We came to have about 53 members eventually. And he said, well, I have a grandson. He's growing up, but he hasn't had much of any training at all. He's not been in school. He fell from the second story window of the French doors and struck on his little head. They had to remove part of the brain. And I thought, well, he'll be a dumbbell. Say, he had a better memory than I had. It's wonderful, the things that this boy could do. And the people he remembered, the places he remembered. He said, I want you to take him summertime and just go out. I don't care what you do, but just practice some of the scout stuff with him. Now, W.K. was not an easy man to work with. He was very demanding. And we checked with him every so often to see whether we were on the right track or not. But W.K. said, he called me up from California, and he said, could you get away for 6 months to travel in Europe with Kenneth? I was scout executive at that time. money was a little tight. And he said, I said, I don't see how I could. And he said, well, make it a year then. That's the way WK worked. You couldn't do it for 6 months, but you could for a year. And he said, I don't care how long it is. I just want to make up to this boy what he has lacked. And so that began quite an association. WK has done a great deal. He's gone now, but he, through the influence of Kenneth and this work, he established the Kellogg Foundation. On that trip, I think of one place we went to. Kenneth and I were staying at the YMCA in Jerusalem. I think the finest YMCA building in the world, I believe, built with American money. And I heard the bugles outside, and I couldn't imagine what that would be. I went to the window and looked out, and there was a troop of perhaps 60, 65 boys, all in uniform. And these lads, I went down and got acquainted with them, of course. And I found that they came from a town called Kerak, K-E-R-A-K. You've never heard of it, probably. But if you'd been living in the Middle Ages, you would have known Kerak. It was one of the capitals, that part of the country, and a very wonderful place where the Crusaders had set up their headquarters. So we found that these boys, they invited us to come over to their country, over in the Near East, and we got acquainted with many of them and their families. These boys, when they're 12 years old, each boy was given 3 things. They all had them, the ones who were 12. They had a pistol, and it was full. They had a horse, and they had a scout uniform given to them at that time. Some of the most wonderful youngsters to live out in that desert country and to carry on. And I felt, although we met with hundreds and hundreds of other boys in many different countries of Europe, we didn't find any in Germany, we didn't find any in Russia, but most other countries over there, I found that this scout handshake with my left hand and these 3 fingers, the scout salute, the scout sign, the scout oath, these were passwords that sealed us with the rest of scouting in that whole part of the world. Well, I mustn't talk longer, but I know that it has been a great thing for us. The other night we were having a Scout Eagle Award, and I was thinking how from the first we took the Scout law. You all know it? Let's say it together. A scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And I was thinking about a little boy who was in the hospital, and they tried to unclench his fist, but he wouldn't let them. But finally they put him under for the operation, and they opened his hand, and there he had written on a little slip of paper, "A scout is brave." This is just a little example of the sort of things that you fellows have been getting through this fine troop here. Glenn, I'm proud of you. So happy to have had the privilege of your acquaintance and leadership. Thanks a lot.